welcome back to Aachen. You were here a couple of years ago where we played the bridge oration, which we recorded for Naxos earlier in 2020. And now you're back for a Tchaikovsky program, which is very fitting because Tchaikovsky visited Aachen in 1887 for 6 weeks. Tell us what you're going to be playing.
Well, so we're going to be playing the Rococo Variations and as a little encore, the Pezzo capriccioso, which of course was written here in Aachen. And the thing to note about the Rococo Variations, maybe we can get into that a bit in detail, is that there is some controversy about the versions that are being played, because the version that is more widely known has had quite a bit of altering done by cellist Fitzenhagen. And so we're going to play the first version, as Tchaikovsky originally intended.
There aren't that many recorded versions. I mean, in my preparation, I had a look around, and there are only a handful of them. How do the two variations differ?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting because we see the same pattern both with variations as with the Pezzo, that Tchaikovsky wrote the piece down and then he sent it, in the case of the variations, to Fitzenhagen, who was a cellist of German origin, but he was living in Russia and had a close connection with Tchaikovsky, and he sent him the music just to get input from him, and also, you know, to have him look over the cello part in terms of playability and have him make suggestions as well. So what happened next was that Fitzenhagen made some alterations to the cello part, sent them back to Tchaikovsky, and then Tchaikovsky orchestrated the piece, and then we have actually a manuscript of the variations where most of the orchestra parts are in Tchaikovsky's handwriting, and then again most of the cello part is in Fitzenhagen's handwriting. So this is the version which was probably also premiered in Moscow. And then Fitzenhagen sometime later started making quite more drastic alterations. So he changed the order of the variations. He omitted one variation completely and made a new version of the piece, which is the Fitzenhagen version, which is what we most likely associate with the piece, because this is how the piece became famous. It is very effective, one might say, because he chose the fourth variation from the original version to be the finale, and it is of course a very lively variation. It makes for a great virtuosic ending. However, there are certain things in that alteration of the variations that don't really make a lot of sense in terms of harmonic progression. And then also, if we think about this beautiful C major variation, which of course, the piece being an A major, is the one that is furthest away from the tonality.
And really the heart of the piece. I mean, the expressive heart of the piece.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also the only one that is in 3 all of a sudden. So it makes a lot of sense that this is the second to last variation before that finale. Of course, that got changed when Fitzenhagen made this arrangement. And I think actually this first version, original version if you like, is very beautiful and may not be as virtuosic for the ending and not quite as effective as the Fitzenhagen, but I think it gives another quality because it has a very gentle, very grazioso kind of feeling throughout the piece, and I think this is what Tchaikovsky intended.
The piece was premiered in 1877. It was enormously successful. It toured all around Europe. I think there was a performance in Wiesbaden where Liszt said, "Finally, music, proper music to listen to."
Yes.
And then 10 years later, we take a jump. Tchaikovsky arrives in Aachen.
Mm-hmm.
His best friend is almost terminally ill at that point. Aachen was the center of rejuvenation with the spa, with the hot water, people taking sulfur from the water, and Tchaikovsky came rather begrudgingly to accompany his friend here to keep him company. He didn't have a particularly pleasant stay. There are a few letters where he doesn't have so many good things to say about Aachen, but in his suitcase he had a score of Don Giovanni. Mm-hmm. And particularly at that time he was really obsessed with Mozart, and Mozart was his idol. And I think you can hear already in the Rococo Variations,
Definitely.
It comes from the orchestration. It's a small orchestra, it's a very stylized, you can hear Tchaikovsky, the romanticism, but also a very stylized language that he uses. And he wrote here the Mozartiana suite, which is an arrangement of Mozart's music that wasn't quite so well known there. It was an idea to popularize and to have a bigger access for people to Mozart's music. And also he composed the Pezzo capriccioso, which is also something that we're including on the recording. How do the two pieces compare?
Well, I mean, of course, it's a very different story, the Pezzo capriccioso, in form as well as in language, I would say. It's, as you say, the Rococo Variations are so heavily stylized that you, of course, recognize Tchaikovsky, but it's Tchaikovsky from a very different angle, as it were. And with the Pezzo capriccioso, I think that is a bit more close to what we associate typically.
It's more romantic, isn't it? It's
yes,
a slightly
it is more
larger
romantic.
orchestra.
Yeah, you might say quite a melancholic piece for the first part.
Yeah, well, he wasn't happy enough.
He wasn't happy enough.
So, I mean,
It comes through.
And he was also in love. He fell in love with a servant, Sasha. So I think he was probably in a melancholy mood, which reflects in the piece.
Of course, it has some fireworks as well, a very virtuosic part in the middle and also at the end.
Then we have three other short pieces by Tchaikovsky.
First, we have the Nocturne, which is originally a piano piece. It's from a set of piano pieces, but then arrangement was made for cello and orchestra. That is quite common in the repertoire. And then we have two other pieces that are a little bit less common. First, there is the Valse Sentimentale, which itself for cello is played, but it's played for cello and piano. And I went and made a little arrangement for string orchestra. I like to play that as an encore. It's a good encore after Tchaikovsky program. Shows a little different kind of that charm of this beautiful little salon piece, which is that valse. And then, I went and did something that is, rather a very personal choice, which is to play the slow movement from the violin concerto. I simply love that piece so much, and for once in my life I wanted to feel like a violinist, and I'm very happy that you all join in this craziness.
It's interesting, after the first rehearsal, one of the musicians from the orchestra came to me and said, "Gosh, there's so many bonbons from Tchaikovsky that we're playing, I feel as though I need to go on a diet now because it's such a sort of a lovely program." But I think in combination they work very well.
Yeah. Overture in the program from Romeo and Juliet, and it's again something a bit more unusual and not so widely heard.
Yeah,
Tell us a bit.
yeah. It's the second version of the overture, which has a different dramaturgy. The ending is quite a surprise. Basically, the whole of the piece is the same until the end, and there's some very beautiful new music there. But also, I think that the way that the characters are presented, I think it follows more the story of Shakespeare's play.
Our first meeting so well, and it was so nice. What is so hard to explain is why and how you connect with people musically.
Even then, I felt as though we didn't need to talk too much about the piece, and it was a case of sort of discovering it together. And to go back what you said, that's a very, very special relationship to find within the music world. That not so much needs to be said, but through shared feelings and experiences and interpretational values, I think you can really explore something. And I think also the live performances that we've done of all the pieces that we do have also had new colours and new elements, and there's a trust there now between us that is really exciting.